Story time with Stephanie Story.
Hello, I am historical novelist Stephanie Story. Welcome to my show, Story Time. Today, I am here talking to the memoirist of this new book that just came out in May. I'm so glad you're here by my guest today, Pamela Gay. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's nice to join you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to this conversation for several reasons, because I want to ask you some stuff about psychology and about family and about memoir and writing memoir. But before we get to any of that, because I don't like butchering other people's stories, because I don't like it when other people try to encapsulate my books and they get it horrifically wrong.
I get that, yes.
So please tell my viewers at home a little bit about what your book is about. Tell them what they're going to experience when they read it.
Okay. I'm just actually going to read the synopsis at the back of the book, but instead of in third person, I'll just use I, because it is it captures the book. Okay. So I'm so glad you're here is the story of a family disrupted by ramifications of a father's mental illness. My memoir opens with a riveting account of myself at age 18, witnessing my father being bound in a straitjacket and carried out of the house on a stretcher. The trauma I experience escalates when, after my father has had an electric shock treatments in a state mental hospital, my parents leave me in a college dorm room and move from Massachusetts to Florida without me. I felt abandoned. That's a big line right there. I felt abandoned. Both my parents had gone missing. Decades later, when I and my three much older siblings show up for our father's funeral, I witnessed my sundered family's inability to gather together. Eventually, I'm diagnosed with PTSD of abandonment and treated with EMDR therapy and finally begin to heal. I'm so glad you're here explores the idea that while the wounds we carry from growing up in fractured families stay with us, they do not have to control us. A reflective journey that will inspire readers to think about their own relational lives. So that's my goal. I shift to the end in an unusual way for a memoir, because usually memoirs are told from one point of view and you just go through your story. And so mine is unique, so I've been told by many people, and it's true. It's written in flash form, and I open up the stories in my family. My mother, my father, my three older siblings, and mostly my mother's story, because it's really about the relationship with me and her. I want to go back and decades later and unite with the mother of my childhood. And of course, you can't go home again. I know that, but my mother was different after everything that happened in our family, all the ramifications. Of course, I was, in my story, which you have here, but my mother also, of course, went through a lot. And so she was different. She wasn't like exactly, I wanted that mother, and I thought maybe I could reconnect with her. My father's in the nursing home, he's dying. My mother called for help. I go there. So a lot of it is about the weekend of that funeral, which was sort of like a family funeral in a sense.
What drove you to write a memoir about such difficult events for you and your family? Mm-hmm. Why did you feel compelled to write a memoir?
Because like the trauma I experienced, which was stuck, I later learned in my body and wanted to come out, and it didn't come out for decades until I had that EMDR therapy. Okay, the story was stuck, you see, in me. And the story wanted to come out. The trauma needed to come out, and I finally found my way to do that. But the story kept saying, like, come on, would you? And so I would start writing it a little bit, and then I would put it down. And I'm motioning like this because I would put it under my table, and I would do other things, stories and things. And then a writer friend of mine would come over, and she'd say, what is that under there again, under that? She said, you get that out. I said, look, it's too much to deal with. I worked on it, but can I see what you worked on? oh, the standing in the hallway is so, that's really, and your mother, and I said, okay, I'll probably work on it. And I did, I worked a lot, and I kept putting it under, you know, I did a lot of journal entries. I'm a scribbler, okay? So I did a lot of journal entries all the way along the way. That's how I kind of survived. That weekend, I filled my journal with all kinds of things. So the great details I think I have in my book, that's from observing, recording, and I didn't know what I was going to do with it, really. But writing is a way of life for me. It's a way of how can I, surviving or thriving, moving from survive to thrive. It was really important. But the Turkey Day one, that the riveting opening, everybody uses the word riveting. That I stuck in the middle. It actually appears in that homecoming, but I had it tucked away in the middle. And so what I did was I had to move it up front, right up front.
We need to stop for a moment because the people at home have not read your memoir.
Oh, okay.
So they don't know what the opening Turkey Day riveting moment.
Can I read a little of it? No.
No, just tell my viewers at home. I know what it's about. I know what that moment is. Just tell the viewers at home just a little bit about what happened that day, and so why you ended up moving this moment. So first start with what happened. It's a Thanksgiving. It is a big moment in your life.
I'm going to read a few lines, though. It's just easier. Don't read the whole thing because my voice will really come across. Turkey Day. I was 18 and home from college on Thanksgiving break. It was my mother's birthday. John F. Kennedy had just been shot, and my father was being carried out on a stretcher. Don't let her, his arms strapped to his side, his elbows locked, his body bound in a straitjacket and sunk in a stretcher like a furrow in a field. His eyes, the only part of his body not restrained. They couldn't restrain his eyes. 2 black dots flickering in the light, darting wildly back and forth. I'll skip. I sat on the gray kitchen linoleum propped up against a cupboard next to the oven and waited. My mother, just to fill in, went out with the ambulance, and I was the only one at home at the time. I'd come home from college on Thanksgiving break, and she just put a kerchief over her head, and she started going at the door, and she said, "Would you watch the turkey?" The turkey was in the oven. Instead of sending me somewhere or anything, she just must have been traumatized, and she told me to do that. So out the door she goes. I sat on the gray kitchen linoleum propped up against the cupboard next to the oven and waited. I'm going to skip to the end. I hugged my knees and listened to the turkey hissing in the dark, hot oven, fat dripping like sweat from its headless body, memory of my mother sewing a flap of skin over its neck cavity to keep the stuffing in. This dead turkey, this day, my only companion. My mother had asked me to watch the turkey, but I couldn't see the turkey. I sat in the dark alone, so alone. There was no window for viewing. I opened the oven door and sat cross-legged watching the turkey. Then I turned off the oven. After a while, the turkey stopped hissing. I remembered the turkey I had colored in 2nd grade, each feather a different color, all its feathers spread like a peacock. A happy turkey, not a turkey beheaded for the oven. And then I grew sad, so sad. My father, my mother, JFK, and the Turkey Day. Still gives me the chills even reading the excerpt.
This opening scene where your dad is being taken away in a straitjacket, and you're there, and it's Thanksgiving time, and there's this turkey hissing in the oven. Throughout this memoir, there is all of this relationship stuff about food. Like I think about turkey in the oven. I think about the vegetarian versus meat with your mom. You know, you became a vegetarian and your mom's still like talking about her raw meat and that's the whole thing. And then
there's a funny scene, by the way, listeners, viewers, there's some comic moments. I just want to insert that.
That is one of them.
Yes.
It's great. Okay. And then there are other times when food becomes such a prominent part that you actually insert recipes.
Yes, you do.
Why do you think food is such an important part of relationships?
Because my mother was a really good cook. She was very proud of her cooking, and she loved to cook, and she, you know, I associate her with a love of cooking and all the beautiful dinners that she made. And in fact, a childhood friend of mine just read this and cried through a lot of it. She loved my mother. And she said, remember when we used to go around to the different houses and we'd have a meal at one place, and so, but we left your mother for the last because, oh, her angel cake with that. How did she make? I could never make the kind of fudge frosting she made. We loved that. So I associate my mother with food, and that's why it was so hard for her when I showed up all these decades later. And she actually put cans of beans in the cupboard because my much older sister said, "Oh, you're gonna have some trouble with her. She's vegetarian. You better buy some cans of beans." And that's what I did. I put my hand over my mouth and I said, "No, don't say anything to my mother." I said, I just went, well, what? And she said, "Well, I made some lovely, I can do vegetables." And so the food is very important in that sense. It's interesting you're bringing it up like that. I do weave it throughout. Yeah.
You do, and it's been. And I was thinking about it.
And you should try my mother's very Vermont Indian pudding recipe. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
I could about find it because I was eyeballing it. Like, I'm gonna try that one.
Oh, that is very special.
There it is.
There it is.
Okay.
That's worth buying the book for. It's really good.
Okay. Well, I was also thinking about it in context of, so this book came out in May of this year, end of May this year, which of course was in the middle of this quarantine and this pandemic. So I'm wondering if during this pandemic, as you were watching people sort of obsess about food and then at home baking and then everybody posting what they're eating, if you had any particular insight into why people became obsessed with food or how it built into that. Did you have any reaction to that watching?
Well, for myself, I thought of how my mother, really more before I came along, but I knew about this, how during the Great Depression, for example, and so forth, food, they didn't have much mood. My mother could make something out of nothing. She could just find something, and I have inherited that. I thought, oh, wait a minute, I can't go to I don't want to go to the store now. This is before I even wanted to use a mask or just, okay, I could order or I could, but no, wait a minute, I have over this. What would my mother do? And I just did what she could always put something together. And I have inherited that, definitely. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
I thought about that. I thought about her. She would just, and I made some really good, interesting food. I'm very creative in that sense. I am a good cook too, but differently because I've always felt like a vegetarian. When my brothers would eat steak or something, I didn't just take to it, but I got into vegetarianism, later, but I do like to cook. And people tell me I'm a good cook because someone's coming over for dinner tonight. They like, and I'm creative. I can seem to take different whatever and find a way to make it work. So that came up for me during that period.
You've mentioned your siblings a few times, and a lot of this book is about the whole family.
Yes.
And now this is not a spoiler alert because it happens very early in the book, but
Right.
In the first chapter, you sort of imagine that your brothers were in this scene protecting you.
Yes.
In a way that they weren't, right?
Yes.
So you weave in your whole family. A lot of this is about how the family reacts to your father's mental illness.
Yes.
What were the different sort of familial ways that people had in reaction to your dad's illness in that childhood? What were the different ways that people came at it or had it affect their lives?
Well, my one brother did inherit some mental illness, so he had issues. The one brother, and I didn't even understand it at the time. I would have liked to have been closer with him, but he acted odd, and it just I didn't really understand until later. And my other brother, I didn't really get to know. My siblings left the house when I was very young, 9, 10, or something like that. And we were really not close. I mean, they would come over for those holiday dinners that my mother made, some attempt at gathering together, I guess. But my sister seemed to be angry, the oldest one, 12 years older, the firstborn, angry with, with my mother. And that really upset me, and I didn't understand it. But I did, as you go through the book, I did learn more later why she acted so horribly that weekend of our father's funeral. I didn't have any background, and I fortunately, we somehow were able to talk, and I learned more. I really want to emphasize, I mean, what I really love that I learned through writing this is that, hello, as Rebecca Solnit the writer Rebecca Solnit says, really, there are so many stories. Everybody has a story. I now understand my brother Jerry's story better. I understand my brother Doug's better. I don't have all the information, but I understand. They grew up at a different time. They saw my father and mother fighting, perhaps. I didn't see that. It was eerily quiet when I was around. They didn't do that anymore. My mother just kind of went to the kitchen, The kitchen was very important. My mother handled everything in the kitchen. My father didn't like to get involved. And so anything that went on with the older siblings, she handled in the kitchen. And I stood in that hallway, and when I was little, and I was just riveted with all this action going on. A cop came to the door because my brother drove a car into blah, blah, or the boys went into a nursing home and they scared the resident. I don't know, all these things that would go on. And I was just, and so I think I grew into writing through observing. So many writers talk about, oh, I have, a tablet. I always wrote. I read so many books when I was little. There wasn't a book in my house except A Tree Grows Up in Brooklyn. I mean, that was about it. So, and I didn't nobody took me to the library or whatever, but I observed. I'm an observer. And I've been told that, like at different parties, are you in this party? You look like you're observing. And I put all this together, and I thought, that's how I came into writing.
Okay, so when did you first start writing? Was it something you wanted to do as a kid? Is this something that you grew into later? How did you decide that writing was something you really wanted to do?
Mm-hmm. My mother said I was always putting little books together. I don't know about writing, but I would make little books. But I don't really remember that. When I was in college, I wrote a poem that was published in the newspaper. I started writing poetry, but then I went on with teaching. I taught high school students, later college students. I went through a divorce and all of that. I didn't really come into this writing so fully until later in my life. And I kind of like that story, like, go women, you can do this, like I feel like it's all really coming together now. I'm just writing and writing, and it's been there. It's just, I had to take, because of circumstances, different whatever. But it's been waiting, and I have, I've always done a lot of, I guess you could call it journal writing, scribbling. I've always took notes. I observe people. I'm on a bus with someone, and the woman is acting very angry and yells at the bus driver. This piece is a flash called The Angry Woman. And I record that. I'm so interested in this person, but I then turn to fiction and I imagine maybe why she's like that. Nobody in the bus liked her, but I imagined, see what I mean? I've done a lot of that journal kind of writing for a long time. And then now it's, in the past years, it's come into this flash writing, flash prose. I write short, and you can see that in this memoir. It's all done in flash, so it's unique in that way. Mm-hmm. It's not a collection of stories. But I can't write. I can't write a novel. I don't want to write a novel, and I can't write a novel. I do this. I don't know. You know what it is? I'm a photographer too. So I zoom in, and it says right up here, I'm drawn to microfiction because of both the feeling of immediacy and intimacy. I like to move in on a scene, to zoom in like a photographer, but going where a photographer can't go. That's what I imagine myself doing. I do this, but I get to see, because I do photography, and you zoom in, you capture that. But I then can go in and I can.
Okay, so you're also a photographer in addition to being a writer. I love that you're comparing the way you write to taking a photograph. Is that the only thing that you've gotten out of photography that's fed into your writing? Like how has studying photography changed the way you write?
I think it just helps me write the way that comes naturally to me, these short pieces, just what I said, that moving around. It dawned on me later, I've done several photography exhibits, and it dawned on me later, oh, this is, when I write, I still work in pictures. I do see in frames, frankly, and then I get to move this character around. I get to imagine. And so that's why I'm never going to write long, but I can put pieces together, maybe, or a collection, or this way I think did work. I had to really work on coherence for this, say, because it's in parts, and there are at least 2 pieces there that have been published alone. They're standalone flash memoir.
So take me back to your first memoir, Homecoming.
Mm-hmm.
And you did an installation around it, right? That was multi-sensory. Tell me a little bit about that. That was combining your writing with
I love text and image. I want to do more of that with my writing. I want to kind of return to what I really love, text and image. And it's sort of happening now in some chapbooks and so forth. I'm putting together a chapbook now that will be more hybrid, and it will have text and image. But I tend to be innovative, a little ahead, and then I kind of have to, and then everything catches up, and then I'm there, and So, yeah, in Homecoming, I used photography. And I did text and image, and then I did an installation. It's so much fun with this. I went to this is when computers were it was about 1999. So I won an award from the New York Foundation of the Arts for that memoir, Homecoming. And they only had the words to work with. And then I won an independent ebook award because I made it an ebook before there were ebooks, before Amazon and all of this. It was an ebook before ebooks. And then I thought, because I had a friend who had this great gallery. I loved her gallery. I said, hey, could I do an installation based on my Homecoming? And she said, absolutely. And then I applied, and I got another grant from New York State Council of the Arts. They supported it. But what I did was I took some of the pages and I blew them up and put them on the wall. So when you went in, you could walk around the whole gallery and you would read like you would in a book, except they were on the wall. And then I included my Aunt Madge's fish house punch, and I gave a recipe. And people they could leave with a recipe. They were floating around a bit because my Aunt Madge is my mother's sister, Aunt Madge, who was like a mother to my mother. Anyway, her punch was very punchy. So people said, wait a minute. But I also went around town. I went to our antique row, and I got all different kinds of furniture. I put that in. So you could see my father's recliner. I put Lawrence Welk video there, and people said, oh, I can't believe you got all your parents' things and everything. I said, no, I just went to Antique Row and people lent me these things, and it's like, and people were sitting in the chair, and then I read and performed, and I also recorded my mother's voice, so you could open up a little suitcase and you could hear her talking to me. And to my father was singing. They were singing Christmas carols off key. She was a little off key. And you can do that now. You can go to that site, Pamela Gay, Pamela-Gay.com is my website, and you could go to menu and look up Homecoming, and you can, it's a treasure. I mean, you can hear her voice. It's really lovely. So that was very innovative.
Well,
And that's an image and sound. And
I start to say, I love the combination of visual and audible and reading and all three of those being combined. Were you a visual? I mean, you said you did photography, and this all sounds really visual, artistic, right. And even your flash fiction feels very visually artistic, yes, because it is so visual in its writing. Were you a visual artist when you were young? In any way?
No, I played I colored in like that turkey. Everybody got in that image of the turkey, all outlined for us in elementary school. I colored that in. I didn't really draw much then or anything. I don't know. I think I really observed. I was more like a camera. I was observing. I just said that now. That's kind of funny, but it was like I had camera eyes or something, because people would say, how could you remember that? And how could you? I was like a recorder of some sort. I just.
Okay, so when did you start taking pictures? When did you start taking photographs?
It wasn't until much later, really. I'm trying to, around probably much later, like I might have taken some snapshots or something like that, but around that time of the Homecoming, I dug up old pictures, but I remember my father going around with me when I visited in Florida. He would say, I know you want to go around with your camera. Can I come with you? And so I did during those years there. I would, like that sign on the book, I took that photo because that really, I didn't know I was going to write this book or anything, but I thought, that sign is amazing. Welcome to Sunray Homes, where some of the nicest people live. The sign is now down, and I'm so grateful for She Writes Press and the artists there. They just grabbed onto that and they painted that, from my photograph.
I have one last question before I let you go, because this book came out in May 2020, which is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yes.
What do you hope that readers at home, I hear the catharsis it had for you personally to put the story down, but what did you want readers at home to get? I just feel like there has to be a message for people at home who are going to pick it up, particularly since it did come out during Mental Health Awareness Month.
Oh, yes. I'm glad that you pointed that out. Well, that I think many people have some kind of trauma stuck, or some kind of pain, some kind of, and they don't know what to do with it. And like me, probably, you go to a doctor and you get some medicine. Oh, you have an anxiety disorder, I was told. So for years I took different kinds of medicine, everything. But hello, why did I have the anxiety? Nobody talked about that. And so I would like to just say to people out there, explore what's really going on. I mean, it could be you have this anxiety disorder, but it could be that something is stuck. And we haven't talked about that I'm thinking of mental health. My father should never have had those shock treatments, frankly. He was not a paranoid schizophrenic. So we've come a long way with mental health, and I'd really recommend this book that's now finally a national a bestseller in the New York Times list. But The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Letting Go of the Past, EMDR. So something happened. If something has happened in your past, and you're getting a little older, and you kind of feel that, it usually happens a little later. I mean, I thought I was fine at age 20, 25. I was busy going to college. I was doing this, I was doing that. And it stayed there. And then it just kept knocking there. It hurt. I want out. But it takes a really good practitioner working with you. And I was very fortunate to work with a trauma therapist who studied with him. But you can read this book, and also you can read my section. I have a great section that can stand alone called Healing from Trauma. And I carefully and briefly, but carefully showed how that worked in EMDR. I wanted to do that so people could have some idea. I think, yeah, that it's important that you can find a way to investigate if something is really bothering you. Do pay attention, because for so many years and years, a lot of us, I'm going to say, maybe not all of us, didn't think of the mind and body connection. They're connected. Hello, they're connected. And so if you don't address something that's really aching and bothering you, your body will remember. And that's what he says in his book. The body keeps score, brain, mind, and body in the healing of trauma. So this book is also really good, I think, in terms of healing from trauma, thinking about healing from trauma. Do you agree that part in the whole, so it's not just, oh, this is not a misery memoir?
No, absolutely. That's why I wanted to ask you about it, because I know that there's a message for people at home to look at their own trauma in their own family lives and how mental health has affected them, and I think that's a positive part of it. So I wanted to end on that and highlight that.
I want to say just one more thing about the ending, the opening up of stories. I think today especially, we need all of us to become more compassionate. There isn't just my story. Hello, every single person out there, all of us have relational lives. We all have relationships. Hello. Okay, so to just try to talk back and forth more and hear someone else's story. Yeah,
that's right. We all have to listen to each other. And
yes,
and
I hope my book surprised me. Not surprised me, but I love the direction it went in at the end. Do you see what I mean?
Nice.
I love that for people. I mean, I wanted my book to spark conversation. Not just like, oh, I couldn't read this, is really too, I hope people go through it and see, because look where I came out there at the end.
Right? It's ultimately hopeful to give people,
yes,
give people an optimistic way.
And I'm doing really well. I feel like I'm in another reenactment of my life,
Story
that's
time
great.
with
That's
Stephanie. Story time virtually. We've got time and plenty of stories, talking stories in a novel way. Story time with Stephanie. Story